Even though the cause of this channel is to reassure you that sustaining high frequency vibration is possible, we can't really get there without touching the bottom of where we're going to jump. Where are we starting from to get there? How can we measure the difference of high frequency versus the low frequency? So I think the clearest pathway is to share my own, which is going from emotional crisis. Oh, let me check. Let's check the mics on. So it's all going to be for nothing. My own story, where I was in the abyss of there's no longer emotion down in the abyss. I consider like that there's a spiral of low frequency. But what happens like at the tip of that cone when you reach the last point of vibration? For me, this is like entering the zone of the black hole, right? That just, it sucks everything in, and then you end up on the other side that is like an abyss. There's no floor anymore. When you're spiraling, there's still some traction to the sides. There's a little footing, a little grounding. It's possible to go back up. But once you fall out the tip of the cone, you're like in space, like the emotional void, which is actually what I consider where it's more possible to consider suicidal thoughts, because just when you're in the emotions and feeling sad, sometimes people feel like there will be a lot of dramatic expression before they decide to end their life. Sorry, the video wasn't going to go in this turn, but it is a good example. But I feel you arrive at the point of numbness where, because nothing matters, then it's possible. Because that's where I felt it was possible. So we can't exclude from the fact, when we're talking emotional crisis, this is the whole package, the whole gamma that people are avoiding to talk about, to realize, to assimilate. It's almost like a spectrum of shame if you've been there, and shame for those if they were your relatives or it happened in your family. There's still some kind of hidden aspect about that people don't want to confront. But I do think in reality, especially nowadays, there's a good majority of us that go through life that have considered this at some point or the other, either realistically or not. But as they say, if you want to, or who said it, if you want peace, then you can just end it, if that's our goal. But our goal is not peace. And that's what I love also about this channel. It's not just we want to break even. We want to be vibrant, right? We want to be up there. So in my case, my spiraling started with the bad relationship, and you never know where that's going to go. I thought it would end like other past relationships that didn't go well, right? And I thought those had like mini crises, and I was like, I can totally handle this. But there was one variant that I didn't count on. And that is that in March, after I did like a legal transaction marriage so that the person could stay in the country with me. So it wasn't like a kneel on the knee, offer you the ring. It wasn't this. So we did a transactional marriage, and it was actually quite fine, nice. This was fine, because it was just like, I'll do this for you so you can stay here so we can be together. And I was fine with it. I didn't feel like there was any underlaying intentions there, right? But then when I realized that the relationship wasn't going to work out, that the person had probably growth issues, and it was a lot of mirrored issues maybe that I needed to work out, and thinking, well, why did I attract this person in my life? I still till this day consider that he was probably my greatest teacher, and I think that's a healthy way to look at these people. What you learned from them about yourself, trying to entail a relationship with them. So that's where I was at. The crisis was that in March, I missed a period, and I was like, what? So then I went and bought the birth control, not the birth control, the birth test. I needed to buy the birth control ahead of time. But I thought I didn't need it because I had had cancer previously and they had removed, but like we're getting way too deep into the subject now, right? But I thought pregnancy was not possible for me at that point. So I was very surprised, and I was like, what does this mean, right? And I was fine because my personal convictions were, if that were ever to happen, I would have the kid, and then if it was really not something that I wanted to do, there's always adoption. And my upbringing and just how I am personally, I would never consider to do away with the being, because yeah, that's just how I felt about it, right? Everybody, women's choice, that was my choice. But what I didn't realize was that with the growth of another being inside you, there is great hormonal shift, and you're unable to balance certain emotional circumstances that maybe other people or normally yourself, you would be able to juggle it like normal. So not only did I not know about it, I didn't expect it, and I didn't know it was happening to me. I really believed that was me now, like that this was actually happening to me. And I didn't see it as, well, I don't believe in telling people that they've overreacted anyway, because their reaction is true to what they're feeling, right? But I never even looked at myself and said, hold on a minute, take a pause and see, is this in balance with everything you know about yourself? No, I was just like, maybe the hormones cut that link to like, you're not normally like this, right? This isn't how you are in the past. So anyway, this one variant, but then I said, how come other people fall into emotional crisis? And let's say that they're not with a pregnancy. And there they say that it can be triggered, like the spiral going down, can be triggered by a past trauma where they also were unable to resolve it. And if something happens in the future that resembles that, and the trauma is like residing in the body cells, it can throw the person into this, like, it's an impotency of action, of decisions, of you're completely frozen. That's how I felt. I felt frozen. I felt trapped in where I was at, and I was unable to see clearly how to proceed forward. Normally your mind will come up with an instinctual plan of like, I give this a rest, I'll make a phone call tomorrow. Like, if you've never lived an emotional crisis, this is a helpful video for you to understand what a person going through emotional crisis might be experiencing. So hopefully this can give you a little bit more empathy or compassion, or even just general knowledge. So I'm not giving this a psychological analysis. This is the analysis of a person who lived an emotional crisis. Then I did therapy to get out of it for 10 years. Not all the 10 years were dedicated to that specific crisis, right? The first 2, yes. But then I was able to analyze it through continually. I didn't just abandon my crisis and bury it and be like, well, that's something of my past and now I move on. I consider that what happened to me was such valuable information that it should not be neglected, and it's kind of like an honor that you lived something that was severe and basically gone into the abyss. Like I say, you were out in space. There's nothing to hold on to anymore. How can you get back up from there? How can you move in space when you're set in motion in one direction? You need something else to push against, right? To get you back up, like metaphorically speaking. I fell out of the bottom of the cone of low vibration. I'm down here. I'm in space. What am I going to push off of to go back up? And that's why it's such a miracle. It's a miracle situation if you survive emotion, like you survive that drop into the abyss. And second is that somehow internally you can manufacture the frequency and shift and vibrational shift that can propel. It's like every cell in your body, inside your body, is then pushing. It's pushing inside, finding a direction that can take you back up to that point and then feed you back up through the spiral. This is, well, the work of God, I would say, to get you there. But God cannot do it, as they say, if you don't help yourself, if you're not wishing it, if you're not desiring it. Now, one of my components was that at that point, I had a young human being that depended of me. So not only did I feel responsible to stay alive, because I said, no one will care for this child like its own mother. I mean, I'm sure they would love her to death, but I said, if I go out, this is a child that will grow up without the love of a mother. It's almost like heartbreaking to think about, because even if it's not perfect, even if it's not like the ideal parenting who has had, but it's your mother, and there is something very unique and very special about this. I am grateful that both of us, me and her father, are alive still, and she's lived enough time to remember us, right? Total side note there. So when I was in the abyss, that's what we're going to talk about now, so you can understand what's happening there. If you know someone who's in the emotional crisis, what insights can this bring you from my perspective only of having been there? So going with the number one, the level of crisis is probably deeper than they lead you to believe. So the people around me till this day, I don't think they realize or know that I was in an emotional crisis, unfortunately. Because since you have to mask it every day to move forward, the only way is to pretend, right? I'm pretending for myself, I'm pretending for everyone else, and I'm kind of trying. The one who kind of might have known it would have been the baby, right? The child can know because she'll see your moments of breakdown. But that's gone into her, I hate to say this, it might be into her vibration of trauma as a childhood, maybe the sadness, or for sure when she was in the womb, I was so worried, that she would be feeling all the emotions I was feeling, because her father left when I was 5 months and she was inside of me. And the things that I lived and experienced in my head, in my mind, in my body, in my emotions were so intense that I don't see how they could have not been transmitted. Try as I might. I tried everything. By then I had already gotten into therapy, and I mean, we would place crystals around my belly and try to keep the baby safe, and then try to work with my emotions. It was, it was an amazing time trying to, there I was just processing in the abyss. I was already down there, I would probably say. And I was there for a long period, maybe about 6 to 8 months. So through her delivery, and then the few months afterwards, all the way till December 6th. So yeah, that was of the next year. So amazing, amazing. But since the level of crisis is probably deeper than what they're showing, what can you do as a person or what can you do if you are the person that you know that you're having to mask it? If you're wondering if the person's situation is more intense than they lead to believe, stay longer or talk longer. That's what I wrote down, because people would come and visit me, even my parents, and it's like an hour or 2 hours, and it's chit chat, tea time. Maybe you touch on a little bit of the problem of like, how are you doing financially, and what's the last thing you heard about the father? You know, maybe there's a little bit, but no one is addressing your emotions. And of course, in that span time, you can't really get into it, right? It was even hard for me at first to go to therapy and say, I got to bring all this stuff up out from the dungeon in 1 hour and get it filtered. No, I got better at it every time, because there was no point arriving and just walking on the surface. Thankfully, my first 3 sessions, I found it impossible to talk about the situation. And every time I would try, you know, like the frog and the thing here, and I would just, and so she would come and hold my hands, and I would just cry with her. I paid 3 sessions to find someone to cry with. Do what you got to do. That's all I can say. Do what you got to do. And finally, after I felt like this person has seen my pain, I was able to say a few words on the 4th session, right? So if you're wondering and you suspect that there's really more going on and you love this person and you're sincere about helping them, then stay a little bit longer. They will probably appreciate it and say, I'm going to make, popcorn and stuff. Let's do a movie. Let that be the 2 hours and afterwards dinner, or even if you know it's right, if you're feeling like one of their issues is that they're alone. This was one of mine. I kind of wanted to be alone, but I think I would have preferred to have someone else in the house. Just another person to be there for me. Another person also to live through the nights, because my daughter had a chronic breathing problem. So all night I was awake holding the baby, and just having someone, I couldn't even ask for help. I did it. I was in my brain that this was my punishment, for having chosen the wrong path or the wrong partner, right? So I punished myself. I made myself take care of it all myself. And this was an interesting concept, because I believed this wasn't the ideal situation and I hadn't chosen it for myself. I thought, well, why would I put this on anyone else? They don't want this either. They haven't asked for this. And I cut myself off of the opportunity of maybe having more people help me. I didn't even think to ask for help because, well, I was in the void. There's a lot of components there, right? And I lived out in the country. I wasn't in the city where people could just stop by. I lived pretty far away. At that time, still was a dirt road. And it's not like people were just, we're driving by the neighborhood, came to see you, right? So, yes. Consider trying to stay, or even if you're coming over for a chat, these things take time to process. So come for a morning brunch, offer to bake the food and bring for lunch, stay and let the conversation till maybe she'll get to a point in the evening where there maybe she might reveal, or maybe it'll even be the next day. Say, I'm going to come back in the morning and help you with breakfast because I've really enjoyed spending my time with you. I think you could enjoy. You can also make it about yourself so it doesn't feel like it's a pity visit or that it's all about them. Like, share. So if she's in a vulnerable state, and that goes to my third point about matching the person's frequency. So let's go to the second one, and then we'll skip to the third one where there's that about meeting them where they're at. The second one is the first need the person has is compassion. Normally, like my father's instinct was, let's solve the problem. Now, he did help me solve the financial problem because I didn't know what I was going to do about work, not to work, raise the kid, what to do. So my father helped me sort this all out, and that took a big chunk of weight off of me, but didn't resolve any of my emotional needs, right? So the second point I had is my need was for compassion. Someone who's just going to be loving and caring. They know you're in dire straits. So solving things only deals with the mind. And when you're in emotional crisis, that's why it's called emotional crisis. You're not in a mental crisis. This is not an equation. This is a state of being that you've turned into, basically. Your new identity is, my emotions are overwhelming, and the crisis is that I can't manage them. I can't control them. They expand and contract on their own because the thought or the story that I initially put in motion has taken over. It's just taken over your being. And reverse engineering that is what therapy is all about. Thank goodness. So instead of thinking how you can solve things for this person, unless it's actually something you can do, you could add that in. That's always like a bonus. Compassion about that must feel really hard. Tell me more about that. Or this seems super complicated. What have you been doing? Or I understand it, or I felt that once also when such a thing happened, Complementary storytelling, I mean, it's not that the person at that time needs your misery for company, but it helps give insight to the person that they're talking with someone who understands at least a shade of what you're going through. No one's living the exact same thing. They're in crisis, obviously, so they're at the climax of the intensity of what's happening. Hopefully you're not at your climax and then meeting together and then we'll have some kind of explosion, right, of the emotional crisis time too. But everybody is in waves passing, so that's how we can help each other. I'm going through it now. I'm not. I can be there for you and I can walk with the hand for you, no? If you were to have and they were to ask you for some kind of tips or ideas, maybe, but the truth is, in my emotional crisis, I didn't think there was a problem to be solved. I didn't know how to deal with the fact that what I felt in relation to abandonment, and still in my mind thinking I was in love with this person and I'm having their child, and they completely, I almost felt like there was a hatred from this person for me to, like, the treatment or the behavior, like what I received was inexplicable to me. So I don't know if I had lived love bombing because it was such a short, super high, and then like doing the marriage, and then and then all of a sudden it was like, but I want nothing to do with you. There wasn't even like a level of compassion on the human level of like, but okay, I don't want anything with you, but you're still a human, right? We can still be civil. No, it was on the other side, and that can be for another whole vibrational video, like what this was dealing with. But even if it was or it wasn't that way, that's what I felt. And here we're dealing, the emotional crisis isn't about reality. The emotional crisis is what you're feeling and living inside. What is this person feeling and living inside? Don't try to rationalize with the person and tell them that they're over, like that's immediate shutdown. That's like an immediate conversation closer. I would start to tell, I remember a friend once that she came over and I was getting there to tell him, and she's like, I don't know what she said about, oh yeah, like men are men or some kind of comment like this. And she's like, but you're strong, you'll be fine. That was it. And I realize now that this is a trigger for some people, that this sounds painful, this path is not what I want to hear about, and you're strong and I'm sure you'll manage it. So this assumption also that I was fine because they wanted me to be fine. They didn't want me to be suffering something that was intolerable and unexplainable, right? So then you feel almost like more distant than the person, right? So at first, at least they didn't know, so then they were neutral. But now they know something's going on, but they've closed the door to that conversation, and now it makes no sense for me anymore to even continue the conversation with this person, right? Anyway, let's get to the third thing. The frequency rebounds. So when you fall into the abyss, there's a complete frequency drop. I would say I could feel it in my body, even after the baby, after my daughter was born. I was like, I felt the hormonal part like balance then, and I was like, okay, there's something got back on board. I had moments of stability. They were brief, but I had been so long down here below the frequency area where there's like no frequency, that a lot of my muscle memory and my mental memory was operating down here. Like the mental operations were down here. And you rebound from people because most people on their daily basis are not in the abyss. Like most people, even if they're in a low frequency spiral, they're like around here, maybe going down. But they're not here. So when you meet up with people or think about, or like just interacting in general, I felt how these people rebounded from me. So if you know someone who's going through an emotional crisis, it's highly probable that you're going to feel some rejection towards them. And if there's someone that you love or you care for, they're a family member, and you can notice that their density, like it's like it repels you, right? You're like, ooh, I don't want to be with so-and-so. He's always so, right? If you want to know and get close and potentially be of any use to this person, lower your self-righteousness and where you're at and everybody should be here. Like, take a step down. I'm not saying lower your frequency, but in general, we want everyone to be well, right? Everyone get on board. Everybody lift up. Everybody should be feeling well. You're not good. Put a smile on your face, right? This is not how it works with people that are in the abyss, at least. Not in my case, at least. I was much more able to talk to people who, well, basically only my therapist, who would receive me in a calm, neutral fashion and then sit down with me, and I could tell that she would ground her frequency. She's not all like, hey, how's it going? Any better this week? It's like, no, she would ground her frequency, coming as close to mirror mine so that I could relax and feel okay without this shock of impact, no? And even lean out, no? She would sit down and lean out, like, give me the space. And she wouldn't even ask me. I would sit down and I'd wait for the moment that I was like, this week, blah, 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 blah. Like, not even how does she want to start? Like, she had no agenda. She would just sit back, and then she's like, she would write a few notes down. And then from the notes, she said, you mentioned 3 times the feeling of abandonment again. Let's look at that. And then we went in and talked a little bit more about how this made me feel. And then we would practice what now I know as EFT, because back then I didn't even know we were doing tapping. I just knew that this was our little ritual for, I don't know what I thought we were doing, but I thought, this is the therapy. I did it for years without knowing what it was, till one day I asked her and I said, so what kind of therapy do we do? And she's like, oh, we've done almost everything in here, because not only did we did the tapping, we did, like, I'd lay down and she'd do electrolysis to me, to this part of my neck, and then she would do something with a little wooden trump and pass it and weave my energy back side to side. The crystals that I mentioned, you know, she was all about the stones and stuff. She's like, we've done everything. But I asked her, I'm like, what's this one that we do? And she's like, ese se llama tapping. And then I looked it up, and actually I'm getting certified right now, because when I finished therapy, she was like, you don't need me. So I didn't finish therapy. You're never done, right? But I was 10 years doing this, and basically I would run the therapy sessions on my own at the end. So when I moved to the States, she's like, you're well and ready. Don't worry about it. You know, you already know what the process is. You already know what we're doing. So you can just tap yourself out of any situation. Because you create, I didn't have a dependency on my therapist, but I did have a relationship with her. And it's kind of like your wise grandmother from your tribe that probably was taken from me, because I didn't have now those relationships. So, getting back to the frequency rebounds from others, they rebound from themselves. So, even in my emotional crisis, I'm rejecting my own void, because my normal frequency is high. I actually have a frequency. So being without frequency, where you're in the numbness, where you feel nothing, that is not even comfortable for the person that's in there. So there's also, like, kind of, I felt a self-rejection to my state. Whenever I would feel that I found myself in that state, I was not enjoying myself being in this state. There's where, hence, the crisis, no? When you're not yourself, this is where depression sits in really strong, because it's not your natural state of being. So then there's like an identity crisis going on there as well. Crisis with crisis. And this is what makes us feel isolated. So I just wrote down, don't be a bundle of joy, be relatable, so that it's attainable to have an interaction with the person who's having emotional crisis. Because eventually this person will laugh again and be joyful and take on the nature that maybe you once knew from them. But the way to help them to get there is not even reminding them excuse me, of who they were. Had to get some water there. This will only make them feel guilty if you remind them of who they were. I mean, me just thinking about who I was before was enough to I'm like, what happened to me? You know, and looking at the destruction, especially after giving birth, the destruction to the body, the destruction that had happened in my mind, and just, yeah, the emotions. See, there's a lot of sun coming in there. At the end of the video, no? Oh, let me correct the lighting for you. Oh, goodness. All right. We made it 35 minutes. If you made it till here, God bless ya. And remember that every day you wake up stronger, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.